region and successfully advanced into the eastern part of the Dimitrov settlement. The Russian military has conducted strikes on 138 Ukrainian military targets, including transport and fuel energy infrastructure, rocket artillery, warehouses, as well as temporary deployment sites for foreign mercenaries. Russia has claimed that its air defense systems intercepted and destroyed 195 fixed-wing drones, 6 HIMARS rockets, and 10 guided aerial bombs. Meanwhile, Ukraine's Naftogaz has said that Russian attacks targeted production facilities in Kharkiv region, gas infrastructures in Sumy, Chernihiv regions as well. He has stated that Russia struck its thermal power plant in an overnight attack and launched 3 major attacks on Ukraine's gas infrastructure over the last 7 days. Now, for this discussion, we are joined by Professor Rohan Gunaratne. He's an international affairs expert, joins us live from Singapore. Thank you very much, Professor, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, how did Russia's continued advances in these regions and strategic attacks on its Ukrainian infrastructure, such as the gas and thermal power plants, how will this impact the Ukraine's ability to sustain its defense efforts?
Asuma, what we have witnessed in last night is that Russia has made very significant advances in terms of capture of more territory in the Donetsk region, as well as fired missiles and drones and other capabilities into Ukraine, including to a hospital that has led the patients to be evacuated. We have also seen that Britain and Germany and other countries have pledged great assistance to Ukraine so that Ukraine will be able to sustain this war in the long term. And there is also a concern from the Polish government based on the weaponry that has been fired by the Russians into Ukraine that Russia may attack the rest of Europe in the coming weeks and coming months. That is, if there is an escalation. President Trump is trying his best to resolve this dispute. He will meet shortly with many leaders in Europe so that there can be a resolution to this conflict.
And Professor, with Ukraine managing to also repel nearly 100 Russian drone strikes, what does this say about Ukraine's air defense capabilities?
Ukraine has built significant capabilities because of US and other European countries assisting Ukraine to do so. So Ukraine capabilities are largely what the Americans and the Europeans have helped to build, and Ukraine is fighting back. But if you look at Russia and Ukraine, Russia is a very big country with a lot of capabilities. Ukraine, of course, has the support of the Western nations, and that is why it is able to fight Russia back. So in the short term, yes, both parties will fight. In the long term, what is important is for there to be a resolution to this dispute. Otherwise, it will continue to be a bloody conflict where both sides will lose lives and wealth.
And now Russia's Ministry of Defense, like we have said, that it had claimed significant successes. How credible are these claims, and what role does this information play in the ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine?
Russians have 2 types of news. One is their political news, and the other is what really happens on the ground. So we have to examine that news very carefully. But having studied Ukraine, the developments in Ukraine very closely, I can tell you last night was a significant victory for Russia. But again, Ukraine will fight back. It is correct that Ukraine intercepted a very large number of Russian missiles and drones. But in the long term, Ukraine is going to suffer more than Russia. That is why it is so important for there to be a resolution.
Right. With that, I would like to thank Professor Rohan Gunaratne for always joining us and sharing that insight. Thank you very much. Now we move on. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte has said that before a meeting with NATO defense ministers, NATO and the European Union were working together in their efforts to set up a drone wall to protect member countries from drone incursions. Rutte has said that the EU and NATO had different roles, with NATO providing capabilities on the military side and the EU holding the soft power for the internal market. Let's listen into what Mark Rutte has said.
I can assure you that the EU and NATO are really working very well together. There is no doubling at all. Ursula von der Leyen, the President of the European Commission, myself, the relevant commissioners, including Kubilius and of course Kaja Kallas and the others, we are all making sure that we make use of the strengths of the two organizations. And NATO is good at the hard stuff, which is the standard setting, the capabilities, the military side. And the EU has the enormous soft power of the internal market, the enormous soft power of making sure the money is there, making sure that the nations in the EU are aligned. And this combination is crucial to work.
This comes as European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has proposed the drone wall after about 20 Russian drones entered the airspace of EU and NATO member Poland last month, which Russia denies. Rutte has also reaffirmed NATO's support for Ukraine. He has highlighted the new Pearl initiative launched by the group, which involved the United States supplying military support to Ukraine paid for by other NATO allies. Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, who is also at the meet, has said that the United States expects countries to invest more into the Pearl Arms initiative for Ukraine. Now for this discussion, we're joined by Glenn Grant. He's a former advisor to Defense Minister of Ukraine, joins us live from Riga. Thank you very much, Glenn, for joining us again. Good to see you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Now, given Ukraine's ongoing experience in defending against Russia, how does the EU plan to leverage Ukraine's lesson learned in this current ongoing war?
Personally, I don't think they do. I don't see any linkage between what the EU, and I'm sorry, even in many cases NATO is talking about, and actually what is happening on the ground. I mean, the idea of a drone wall that you've just talked about is, in many cases, just simply nonsense, because a wall, you know, gives you the idea of a line, but we've just seen quite clearly that drones have been flying around in Germany and they've been flying around in Denmark, and these certainly did not come from Russia, out of Russia. They came either off ships or they were transported into the country and flown from inside the country, in just the same way the Ukrainians did when they took drones into Russia. So I think that the whole of the EU idea and thinking at the moment is very, very 1970s Cold War thinking. And Germany has quite rightly made a point that, you know, this drone wall is a lot more difficult than people think, because if you've got to defend against drones everywhere, over your own airfields across the whole of NATO, maybe even you know, in places like Svalbard, things, you've got to have a much more lively system than we have at the moment. And don't forget that, you know, NATO air defense is very, very clever, but it's also not very good at picking up things at a low level. And so if drones are flown at 50 feet above the ground, you've got to have completely different systems from the big stuff that we've got at the moment. So there's a lot of thinking to be done, and that thinking and then action by NATO is not going to take 2 months or 3 months. This is a 2 or 3 year job.
Yes, and last time we did talk about how long it will take, and you mentioned that it's like saying how long is this thread, and yeah, and as Europe enhances its defense capabilities, we saw Germany announce it. We also saw, I think it was Sweden that announced it. So particularly in response to these emergencies,